The European Parliament, Stephen Woolfe, a UKIP MEP, lies unconscious on the landing after an internal party dispute. Good evening. Rare it is that a party leader leaves after 18 days in the job. Rarer still that one of the politicians who might follow her is taken at speed to hospital with a suspected serious brain injury after an altercation at an internal party meeting. For years, the rowdy and fractious internal politics of UKIP have provided the media with a theatrical and salacious number of stories. But tonight, that has taken a darker turn. What is the future for the third force in British politics?
There is a growing verbal violence which has been allowed to fester, and it does go right to the top.
Also tonight, to frack or not to frack, the Community Secretary has granted the first test licence in years. The local community in Lancashire is up in arms, claiming it is democracy that's being fracked. The UN warns that the whole of besieged ancient Aleppo, population 250,000, will be destroyed in 10 weeks unless the bombing stops. And we speak to the city's last coroner, his job to track the endless deaths. And Hurricane Matthew, benign by name, vicious by nature, the most powerful in the Caribbean in a decade, having pummeled Haiti and Cuba, it is now heading for Florida, where it will become part of America's political storm.
Also tonight, Brexit and culture. As one of the biggest art shows in Europe opens in London, how do artists feel about Britain's new circumstance? What's the impact on their art?
When Remain lost, I kind of thought, God, I must live in a bubble, and I don't really know what's going on in my own country.
So just 24 hours ago, Stephen Woolfe was declaring his candidacy for the leadership of the UK Independence Party. But tonight, he's recovering in hospital following an altercation at a meeting in Strasbourg with fellow UKIP MEPs. It's reported that he was involved in a confrontation with a colleague over his admission that he had considered defecting to the Conservative Party. UKIP's interim leader, Nigel Farage, has tonight announced an inquiry into the incident, as Jackie Long now reports.
UKIP's Stephen Woolfe, here with the leader he's determined to succeed. The party's leadership battle has been mired in controversy. In recent days, it's bordered on farce. Diane James, who won the first leadership contest, stood down after just 18 days. Then this morning, UKIP's dramas took a more serious turn. Just before lunchtime, Stephen Woolfe collapsed on one of the walkways in the European Parliament building in Strasbourg. It happened after he'd been at a meeting of party MEPs supposed to clear the air, but which ended in a fight between him and a colleague.
What I gather is there was an altercation, a dispute in the UKIP group meeting, and one of the MEPs threw a punch and hit Mr Woolfe, who's in hospital now. Mr Woolfe banged his head on a metal pole, apparently, but appeared to be okay at that point, carried on with his work, attended the votes here in the plenary, and about an hour after the incident, having left the plenary and walking across to go back to his office, he collapsed.
The meeting to clear the air followed an admission by Mr Woolfe yesterday, the same day he announced his second attempt at the leadership, that he'd been considering defecting to the Tories. Words were exchanged between him and fellow UKIP MEP Mike Hookham. Sources say the two men took the dispute outside and claim blows were exchanged. Mr Woolfe fell and hit his head. After collapsing, Mr Woolfe was taken to hospital where his condition was reported as serious. By this afternoon, he had regained consciousness and released this statement.
The CT scan has shown that there is no blood clot in the brain. At the moment, I'm feeling brighter, happier and smiling as ever. I would like everyone to know that the parliamentary staff, the UKIP MEPs with me and hospital staff have been brilliant.
This evening, Nigel Farage, who stepped back in yesterday as interim leader, visited Mr Woolfe.
He's been through quite a big shock today. As for the events that led up to it, well, it's two grown men getting involved in an altercation. It's not very seemly behaviour, but I'm not today going to get involved in the blame game and name names and say who did what, but it shouldn't have happened.
But while Mr Woolfe may be recovering well, there are questions about what damage has been done to his leadership bid and the wider party. riven by divisions, even those within it accusing it of ugly internal politics.
I'm saying that there is a growing verbal violence which has been allowed to fester, and it does go right to the top, I'm afraid. You know, I've held my peace on this for a very, very long time, and I think that what has happened today in the European Parliament demands that I should now speak in this way, because clearly nothing is going to be done to stamp this out unless public pressure is put on the party chairman to do something about it.
Mike Hookham couldn't be contacted all day, but an aide told reporters he insists it was a verbal altercation and denies punching his fellow MEP.
Jackie Long, and our political correspondent Michael Crick is with me. Michael, do we really know what happened?
I don't think we do, actually. I'm not 100% convinced there was actually a physical fight between these men. I think there probably was, but I'm not convinced. And indeed, it's interesting how people keep using the phrase altercation.
We do know he was taken to hospital.
We know he was taken to hospital.
Suspected brain injury.
Indeed, but we also are told that he fell subsequent to this altercation. And Mr. Hookham's spokeswoman has said tonight, Mike did not touch him. And a friend of Mr. Hookham has texted me in the last few minutes saying bootnecks, which is a term for Royal Marines, bootnecks don't slap people, and a slap does not cause a bleed on the brain. And he would have a mark on his face if he'd been punched hard enough to achieve half-body paralysis. And it's also interesting the way in which Mr. Hookham has not issued a direct statement himself. He has not apologised in any way, hasn't expressed any concern for Mr. Wolf's well-being. And the other interesting thing is that nobody's actually come forward and say, yes, I saw the fight, and this is what happened. There don't seem to have been any eyewitnesses to a fight, so it's still mysterious.
What are the implications for UKIP?
Well, I think in any normal political party, these two men would be in big trouble, you know, arranging to go out and have a fight outside and hitting each other, as appears to have happened. But UKIP is not a normal political party. You never know. This may actually boost the reputations and careers of both men in a strange way. Indeed, a UKIP senior UKIP figure was saying to me today that this will go down well in the kind of working class communities that we're trying to target. I mean, it seems an extraordinary thing to say. But remember what happened to the famous Prescott punch in the 2001 election, I think it was, when John Prescott punched a protester and his popularity soared. So the implications of this may actually boost Mr. Wolf and Mr. Hookham, or one or the other.
Michael Crick. Well, I'm joined now from Washington by Raheem Kassam. He's the editor of Breitbart, the London website, and he's former chief advisor to Nigel Farage. He announced last night that he would also be a contender for the UKIP leadership. It gives political infighting a new twist, doesn't it? I mean, actual fighting. I mean, amazing circumstances seem to have unfolded in Strasbourg. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it is a dark day for the MEPs, for the UKIP MEPs. I don't think anybody can be proud, nor should anybody be boasting about this or thinking that this is going to somehow endear people to UKIP. I would also say, however, that it's not a solitary UKIP thing. You remember the Labour Party MP Eric Joyce in 2012 had this. You've had members of the Conservative Party engaging in fisticuffs in Parliament as well. These things can happen. It's a very human thing to happen. When you don't have a leader, when you don't necessarily have a raison d'etre, when things are a little bit in existential crisis, then passions can overflow. And I think both of these two men, again, to echo what Michael said, we don't know truly what happened, but I think both of these two men will look back at this and think that didn't really reflect well on me or my party.
But then we have Edward Lee from inside the party saying, you know, Neil Hamilton rather, saying he truly is a creature from the gutter who would do anything to get his mug on the screens. This is talking about, who is he talking about? This is Aaron Banks talking about Neil Hamilton. I mean, this sort of language is absolute. I mean, actually, there's so much bad language between so many different people. There are so many different factions. How do you ever put this thing together again?
Well, I don't think there are so many different factions. I think there are two very distinct factions inside UKIP at the moment. And the point is this, you know, I've been saying all day, and I will continue to say, that actually I am guilty of engaging in this kind of internecine warfare as well. But if today has taught us anything, is that we need to take a step back. We need to reflect very seriously, not just on this incident and what it means, but we need to reflect on who we are as a political party, what we are as a movement, what we stand for, what we're going to do going forward, and start positively campaigning on those issues and remembering that we're all on the same side. If you do want to solve this problem, then you have to say to the people who aren't UKIPers through and through, who have done things that have been completely contrary to what the party has stood for so long, you have to say to them, look, thank you for being in this party, but I'm afraid your services are no longer required.
Well, the trouble surely with the party is it's extremely male. There's been some very violent rhetoric. We have Neil Hamilton saying it goes right to the very top. I don't know what he means by that. Is that Nigel Farage? Is he a brutal and verbally abusive man?
No, I think when Stephen Woolf is sitting in a hospital, and by the way, you know, I want to take this opportunity to wish him the speediest recovery because he is a good personal friend of mine, as well as an excellent candidate and MEP. But when Neil Hamilton uses this incident, when Stephen Woolf is laying in a hospital, to attack the party leader, to attack different figures in the party, well, this is the exact problem we're talking about, isn't it? I think, you know, we just need to take a step
Well, he's
back.
not
Maybe
alone
let's all
exactly.
get around a table.
Let me quote your main funder. We have here Aaron Banks saying, if Neil Hamilton and Douglas Caswell remain in the party, then I'll be leaving UKIP.
Yeah, and I sympathise with what Aaron is saying because the two of those people don't see eye to eye with him, and there have been lots of bust-ups and disputes between them over the last year especially. So I sympathise with what Aaron is saying. What I don't necessarily sympathise with, especially today, is the way he is saying it. Again, this is an open call to all UKIPers out there. Either get together or get lost.
OK, well, let me put you a last brief question, and that is this. This is really an existential crisis, as you pointed out at the beginning, but it's an existential crisis caused by the fact that UKIP doesn't have any point anymore. You've now got a major party doing what UKIP was offering, which is trying to get Britain out of Europe.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment to make, but that is not fair if you look at the party's manifesto from 2015, how much it has influenced the government on issues like grammar schools. You know, UKIP may well have been a single-issue party once upon a time. It is not a single-issue party anymore, and it actually represents people way across the country who feel that they can't vote for the Conservative Party and they can't vote for the Labour Party because they've been left behind by Conservative and Labour governments. And therefore, UKIP does have a serious raison d'etre, and we need to find it and project it.
Well, Rahim, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we'll have to see whether there is a party at the end of it all. Thank you very much. Matt.
Now, the Community Secretary, Sajid Javid, has defied the views of a local community in Lancashire by ordering the go-ahead for fracking. Lancashire County Council had previously refused permission for the development at the Preston New Road site in Little Plumpton. If it now goes ahead, it'll be the first example in the country of what is called horizontal fracking, and it could be the green light for a series of similar developments around the country. Here's Kieran Jenkins.
After years of delays and disputes, it is liftoff for fracking in the UK. The rigs, the drills, the wells, they're coming straight here for this field on the Fylde. A devastating day then for some local residents, but a big day for the UK shale gas industry. Trillions of gallons of shale gas are said to lie beneath British soil. The energy firm Quadrilla now has approval to explore for shale gas on this site, and another is still being reviewed. They can frack again in the UK for the first time since 2011, when 2 minor earthquakes brought fracking to an abrupt halt. Now, what Quadrilla is saying is that even at full flow, this site won't look like much. It's marked out by 4 of these little fenced-off areas, about the size of 2 rugby pitches. And what they plan to do is to drill 2 wells, and all the activity goes on beneath the ground. So they drill down about 2 miles underground, and then they can drill out horizontally at about 1 to 2 kilometers in any direction. That means drilling beneath people's homes, people's businesses, and even the motorway just over there. After drilling down and then out, a mix of water, sand and chemicals is forced through the cracks to release shale gas. They call it horizontal fracking, and it's never been done before on mainland Britain. Earlier, Lancashire Council said no. But the government stepped in. Today's decision, an early test for the Prime Minister and that promise outside number 10.
We will do everything we can to give you more control over your lives. When we take the big calls, we'll think not of the powerful, but you.
A spokesman told me her words speak for themselves. But the decision of Lancashire Council was overturned.
That makes me feel sick. It does.
These residents just heard the government was minded to approve fracking near their homes.
Just listen to this. I mean, you can't hear anything. It's so beautiful.
They fought it on noise, health and environmental grounds for over 3 years.
Yeah, I always thought the Conservative Party looked after, the ordinary person just as much as any of the other parties. I actually feel that's not the case. I actually feel that our government is being driven by big industry.
Maybe the ordinary person in this case, though, is the average energy consumer, and the government has to look out for their needs, doesn't it?
But we can do that in a better way.
But the government says fracking will make us less reliant on importing energy, and it could support thousands of jobs. The Scottish government, though, has a moratorium on fracking, and Labour says it would ban it.
There will be site construction, so you'll see bulldozers and gravel and etc. like any construction site. Then you'll see a drilling rig.
Here on the Fylde, Cuadrilla will be drilling by April next year.
I don't think it's a competition between business and the ordinary person. We are employing ordinary people here in Lancashire. We are a Lancashire business.
Would you be happy with fracking going on beneath your house?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly if I could benefit from it and my children could benefit from it and the economy can benefit from it, no problem.
So would you buy a house here?
I'm not planning to, but I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Soon the fences will go up here. Protests inevitable, because fracking now seems inevitable too.
Kieran Jenkins, well, with me now is the Friends of the Earth energy campaigner Rose Dickinson, and we're joined from Glasgow by Ken Cronin, the Chief Executive of UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Good to have you both on the programme. Ken Cronin, if I could start with you. The last time you tested for fracking in Lancashire in 2011, you caused an earthquake. You're going to cause another earthquake?
Absolutely not. The regulations are very tight. We also have a lot of seismic monitoring devices that record down to a very, very low level, and the actual limits set by the regulation are extremely low, so low that you won't be able to feel it.
I mean, if they're so low, I gather that the last time you caused that earthquake, it was 2.3 on the Richter scale, which isn't huge, but it's still an earthquake. And the limit is now down to 0.5 on the Richter scale, which is, I mean, I could probably cause 0.5 by banging this table. So what's the point, really?
Well, the reality is that a lorry going past your home is going to be higher than a 0.5, but the actual regulation itself now says that when we get to 0.5 deep underground, we have to stop, investigate what has caused it, and then work out what to do next.
Right, but if the limit is set so low, it's virtually inevitable that you're going to have to stop the test fracking.
Well, let's see how we get on. The regulations are there. They've been put in place to give comfort to the local people.
Right. Rose Dickinson, I mean, we've been here before, to frack or not to frack. The point is really, what are the alternatives? We need more energy sources. Here's one right underneath our feet on British soil.
Well, the government today have made the wrong decision by forcing fracking on Lancashire and overturning a locally made and democratic decision to say no to this risky and unwanted technology. It was only a year ago, or just over a year ago, that local councillors voted overwhelmingly to reject fracking. After looking at the evidence, they concluded that it poses unacceptable environmental risks to local people. The government shouldn't just ignore that decision and force fracking on any local community.
OK, well, let's turn to you with that one. You've overturned local democracy. This is against grassroots democracy, what you're doing.
Well, we had a positive planning decision in North Yorkshire earlier this year, and Friends of the Earth are actually now judicially reviewing that.
But we're talking about Lancashire here. What about Lancashire?
No, but I think it's hypocritical of Friends of the Earth to be criticising us for using an appeal process that many other firms and industries do, as they have done in North Yorkshire.
Rose Dickinson?
When it comes to North Yorkshire, the local district council there overwhelmingly voted again to oppose fracking. And actually the reason we're judicially reviewing that decision is because they failed to look at the climate change impacts of fracking. And we know that we need to keep 80% of fossil fuels in the ground if we're going to avoid dangerous climate change. And it's just wrong to say that setting up a whole new fossil fuel industry is the right thing to do. It's completely wrong.
But the floodgates are now open, and post-Brexit, this is the reality. And isn't it possible that it might be just better to get our local energy from our local sources and instead of shipping them in from Kuwait or the United States? This is about energy security.
What the industry have today is a piece of paper, but what doesn't change is the community opposition to fracking. People in Lancashire do not want fracking on their doorsteps. The floodgates may open, but that's to the opposition to fracking.
But this is about British energy security. Why not have energy security and independence in this country, even if it goes against the wishes of some people in Lancashire?
The government's own data shows that the best way to improve energy security is to reduce our demand for gas, and that's by investing in energy efficiency measures and renewable energy, which will help people by making their homes less cold in the winter months and reducing their energy bills. We need to get off the hook of fossil fuels, and going all out for fracking is simply not the answer.
Ken Cronin, the majority of people in this country, 80%, are not in favour of fracking. They're not in favour of recarbonisation or going back to coal. They want alternative energy, renewable energy sources. You're going against the wishes not just of the community in Lancashire, but the community of this country.
Most surveys, particularly the ones produced by government, actually showed that the for and against are roughly the same, and the big group in the middle are undecided. But we have a dependency on gas, particularly for heating. 84% of our homes use gas for heating and 61% for cooking. Within the next 20 years, 80% of our gas will come from outside the UK. That's the reason why we need to produce our own gas, so we can secure our own future and heating needs.
OK, got to leave it there. Ken Cronin, Rose Dickinson, thank you very much indeed. John.
Now, the southeastern United States is battening everything down ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Matthew. More than 2 million people in Florida and surrounding states are being urged to evacuate their homes before the storm hits. The Category 4 hurricane has already claimed more than 100 lives on its way across the Caribbean, devastating the island of Haiti and sweeping through the Bahamas. Paul McNamara has this report.
Roofs ripped violently from the homes they protected. The odd expanse where some structure once stood. This is Mother Nature's gift to one of the world's poorest countries. And the view from ground level is no better. 48 hours ago, a bridge spanned this engorged river in Pettigove. Today, at least 130 are dead and 350,000 need immediate assistance. Figures that look set to rise. According to the UN, Hurricane Matthew has caused the worst humanitarian disaster to hit Haiti since the earthquake 6 years ago. The earthquake the country had not yet recovered from. Presidential elections set for this weekend have been cancelled. This was how the Bahamas looked at dawn today, the palm trees clinging to Paradise Island. Having hit Haiti on Tuesday morning, Cuba on Wednesday, and now battering the Bahamas, this storm is barreling up the Caribbean Sea, intensifying with every passing mile. And tonight, it's expected to hit mainland America at least 140 miles per hour before moving up the coast over the coming days. The beaches of Fort Lauderdale, a world of wealth away from Haiti, paint a stark picture between the have and the have-nots.
Lots of water, stuff that's non-perishable, wipes and paper towels, the basic essentials that we need for the storm.
This is the first hurricane to hit Florida in 11 years, and the empty shells tell a story of an entire state at the ready. The governor has just one simple message.
Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Are you willing to take a chance to risk your life? Are you willing to take a gamble? That's what you're doing. If you're reluctant to evacuate, just think of all the people this storm has already killed. You and your family could be among these numbers if you don't take this seriously.
Plans for the coming days have changed. Homes have been readied. And now 1.5 million people are under evacuation orders as the president declared a state of emergency. Cars crept along Florida's freeways this afternoon. The traffic in just one direction.
Well, our weather presenter Liam Dutton is with me now. How serious is this, Liam?
Well, Matt, it's a really bad time of year to get a hurricane in the Caribbean Sea because the ocean waters are at their warmest. And of course, it's from these ocean waters that the hurricane gets its strength. So what's happening is the storm's going over warm water, it's strengthening, it's hitting an island, briefly, temporarily weakening, only to go back over the water, strengthen again and hit the next Caribbean island. So this is why the storm has had such a wide-reaching effect across the Caribbean and been at major status for so long.
And it's heading to Florida? Which part of Florida?
It is. Well, it's not great news. It's heading towards Florida through Thursday night into Friday local time. It's going to run very closely to the East Coast in a parallel fashion. And it's going to go as a Category 4, sustained winds of 140 miles an hour, remarkable strength of wind. And if it makes landfall in Florida, it's going to be the first major hurricane to do so in over a decade, the last one being Hurricane Wilma back in 2005. But one thing is for sure, if this storm makes landfall or not, it's going to be destructive. There'll be damaging gusts of wind, flooding rains and a huge storm surge, and it really is going to be a complete mess.
And even Katrina was only Hurricane Category 3, wasn't it?
Exactly, so it's one to watch, definitely.
Liam, we'll be watching. Thanks. John?
A Scottish nurse successfully treated for Ebola has tested negative for the disease tonight after being returned to hospital under police escort. Pauline Cafferty, who has twice had relapses from the virus, was admitted to Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital earlier today. Last month, she was cleared of misconduct for allegedly recording a false temperature during a screening process at Heathrow on her return from an aid mission in Sierra Leone in 2014. Talks aimed at preventing a fresh series of strikes on Southern Railway have broken down. The meeting between the RMT and company officials lasted 3 hours, but the two sides failed to come to an agreement on the long-standing dispute over the role of conductors. The union said the train operator had rejected perfectly reasonable proposals it had put forward. A series of strikes will now be held, starting with a 3-day walkout next Tuesday. Now, within the last hour, Jeremy Corbyn has been reshuffling his cabinet, our shadow cabinet. Our political correspondent, Michael Crick, joins me again. And there's some very interesting appointments, Michael.
Yes, first of all, Rosie Winterton, the chief whip, Jeremy Corbyn has sacked her and replaced her with Nick Brown. You may remember a face from the past, who was Tony Blair's chief whip for a while and Gordon Brown's chief whip. Well, he's now having a third stint under Jeremy Corbyn, a very much an experienced fixer figure, and will bring his experience to the job, although there's some speculation he may not actually be very familiar with the new MPs elected in 2015. I think probably Corbyn felt that Rosie Winterton was getting a bit too close to the parliamentary party. Most, of course, had no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, and he no doubt hopes that Nick Brown will wipe the slate clean in that regard. And, of course, Nick Brown will now be heavily involved in the reshuffle, which is now going on. And the big appointments there, Diane Abbott has now become Shadow Home Secretary, replacing Andy Burnham, who had announced that he was going off to stand for Mayor of Greater Manchester. Sarah Champion joins the Shadow Cabinet as the Women and Equalities Shadow. Joe Stevens is the Shadow Welsh Secretary, and Shami Chakrabarti, you recall, did that inquiry into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, was made a Labour peer not long afterwards. Well, she is now Labour Shadow Attorney General. Various interesting points here. One is these appointments now mean that the top 4 jobs within the Labour Party, Leader, Shadow Treasury, Shadow Home, Shadow Foreign, are all held by London MPs, which may not do Labour much good when it comes to reassuring working-class voters in the north on issues like Brexit and immigration. The other thing I think we can say is this idea that MPs are going to be allowed to elect some of the shadow cabinet. There were negotiations going on about that up until yesterday. That is now dead. The shadow cabinet is going to be very much appointed by Jeremy Corbyn with the help of Nick Brown in the next few hours.
Michael Crick.
The United Nations Special Envoy to Syria has warned that the whole of rebel-held East Aleppo will be destroyed before the end of the year if nothing is done to stop the bombardment by Russian and Syrian forces. Staffan de Mistura said he was willing to go and personally escort up to 1,000 Islamist fighters out of the city if that would help stop the fighting. But as our foreign affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman now reports, President Assad has repeated his determination to recapture the whole city.
With Syria's president once again vowing to retake the entire country, these tanks inside eastern Aleppo seem to be making their biggest advance in years. Though the facts are almost as disputed as the city itself. All sides use video footage like this as propaganda, and rebels claim to be holding the government's men back. President Assad says it's a myth to talk about moderate rebels, and these pictures help make his point. New recruits of Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, previously linked to al-Qaeda, and perhaps Aleppo's fastest growing fighting force, radicalized by their president's barbarity, with the UN Special Envoy for Syria warning today that their presence should not serve as an alibi for the East's destruction, possibly by Christmas.
The bottom line is, in maximum 2 months, 2.5 months, the city of eastern Aleppo at this rate may be totally destroyed. We're talking about old city in particular, and thousands of Syrian civilians, not terrorists, will be killed.
The tempo of airstrikes has decreased, but the UN reckons well over 300 people have been killed in the city in the last fortnight. The Syrian army and its Russian allies insist now is the time for rebels to leave, and the UN's envoy seems to agree, offering to escort about 900 men from Jabhat Fatah al-Sham himself. And their departure may be key to Russia agreeing to another ceasefire.
Russia and the government of the Syrian Arab Republic are ready to fulfill their part of the agreement. It includes a ceasefire that was announced but violated by illegal military groups.
The Russians are studying a new UN resolution drafted by the French. In the meantime, this exchange of bodies across the front line is all that's been agreed so far. While Syria's biggest city is now a no-man's land, which few beyond these Red Crescent workers would dare to cross.
Jonathan Rugman. So as the battle for Aleppo intensifies, the numbers of dead and injured in the city are constantly on the rise. Inside besieged eastern Aleppo, one man is working tirelessly to document details of the dead to build a case for war crimes. I must warn you, you may find some of the scenes in my report distressing. Abu Jafar is a meticulous man. And running out of hand gel is one of the least things he has to worry about. He is the last coroner in a city where death is an industry. And this is his office, the last morgue in besieged eastern Aleppo. Since the collapse of the ceasefire, a relentlessly busy place. Busy and grim. The people in the white plastic bags on the truck cannot, of course, be saved, but their memories can be preserved. The nature of their dying can and should be recorded.
لأنه الجثث كانت متحللة ومتفسخة ولم يبقى منها إلا الهيكل العظمي وبعض شعر الرأس.
Think of these volunteers as the bookkeepers of death. They take photos and DNA records of all the bodies here. They pass them on to the UN and other international organizations, all potential evidence to build a war crimes case against the Assad regime.
لاحظنا بضرورة أهمية التوثيق. فبدأنا يعني لما نشوف جثة بشارع ملقاة أو على يعني صرنا ناخذ هذه الجثث ونحتفظ فيها لفترة معينة ونوثقها. قد يأتي يوم ما ويأتي إنسان شريف أو تأتي ذات علاقة وقادرة على إنصاف الشعب السوري نقول لها هي الملف وهي التوثيقات.
Before the war, Abu Jafar was a forensic analyst working for the regime, until one event made him join the uprising. Early in the war, regime forces tortured and executed suspected rebel sympathizers and dumped their bodies in the river that runs through the center of Aleppo.
عندما حدثت مجزرة النهر ضروري أن أكون في هذا المجال كوني الخبير الجنائي الوحيد في المناطق المحررة. يعني لما بتشوفي عشرات الجثث تطفو على وجه المياه أو تكون عالقة بالأغصان أو تكون عسارير نهر ملقاة، منظر شنيع جدا. أنا تم دعوتي لهذه المجزرة من قبل ناس مهتمين بالتوثيق، فرحت وكان منظر رهيب.
Abu Jafar's work has angered the Assad regime. Because of the forensic evidence collected here, even the morgue has become a target. This mobile phone footage shows one of 3 airstrikes on it in the last 2 months.
ضربنا بصاروخين، صاروخ نزل هون وصاروخ نزل على هذيك البناية. حتى السيارة شوفي شلون صارت كتلة حديد.
Several of Abu Jafar's colleagues were killed. The place was badly damaged, including the central cooling system.
الحقيقة هي غرفة التبريد كانت حلم بالنسبة لنا إنه يكون عندنا براد نحفظ فيه الجثث لأطول فترة، رغم إنه خرج عن الخدمة إلا إنه نحن عم نستخدمه الآن بدون تبريد، بس ما بنحسن نحتفظ بالجثة أكثر من 2 أو 3.
Once the bodies are examined and catalogued, they're prepared for burial. It is grim work, but also tender. There's another worry. They're running out of white burial shrouds.
فأصيب يوم البارحة في مجزرة المعادي وهو من الديانة المسيحية يدعى ميشيل أبو يوسف. اهتموا بهم كما هم جزء مننا لأن المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصانا بأهل الذمة وهم أهل ذمة.
Even though he's looking for justice, Abu Jafar has little hope of seeing any himself.
ما بدي أكذب عليكي أقول لك أنا بطل أو أنا أمتلك قوة أكثر من الشباب، لا، ودعنا زوجاتنا وودعنا أولادنا وهذا، خلص نحن ميتين.
The accidental coroner, trying to give dignity to the dead.
From dealing with death in Syria to dealing with health in this country, obese people and smokers are to be denied surgery in a controversial move announced today by NHS bosses in Harrogate. The clinical commissioning group says they will have to take weight management or stop smoking programs for 6 months. This is the second organisation to announce such a drastic measure in the past month. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald is with me now. Can they even do this?
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, rationing has gone on in the NHS for a long time, but it's been covert in many ways. This is overt. This is the clinical commissioning group in Harrogate saying that people who have a body mass index of over 30 or smokers will have to take these courses for 6 months before they can have operations like hip replacement and so on. Non-urgent, I must emphasise. Now, Harrogate says that they need to make £8.4 million worth of savings, and that's why they've got to do it. However, last month, the Vale of York CCG tried this, and the Royal College of Surgeons, after an outcry, NHS England stepped in and said it was actually against the constitution of the National Health Service.
So, I mean, which happens? A further step in by them or other commissioning councils going the same way?
Well, I asked NHS England tonight that we haven't been able to get a response yet, but I suspect more CCGs will try this because basically there is a massive financial hole in the NHS and they are struggling to find ways of saving it. Now, Harrogate CCG itself said the NHS spends around £9 billion a year, they said this in their statement, on patient care for those living with diabetes, and with spending on obesity-related ill health and smoking-related illnesses increasing year on year. Something has to give. There will be critics who will say that they are looking at patients because of their lifestyle choices.
Victoria MacDonald. Matt.
Thanks, John. After the break, Theresa May used part of her conference speech yesterday to attack the international elite. But will the artists who count themselves citizens of the world, some currently gracing the Frieze Art Fair in London, be put off coming to Britain after Brexit? Welcome back. Now, one of the more eye-catching lines from Theresa May's keynote speech at the Tory party conference was an attack on the elite, who she accused of sneering at millions of ordinary Britons. Well, some of those who might fall into the category of the metropolitan elite are involved in London's Frieze Art Fair. I went along to meet some of the most prominent artists at the exhibition. The Frieze Art Fair in London. If there is a metropolitan bubble of the global elite, this is surely its current mecca. Amongst a babel of languages and a lens full of fashion, the art world of planet Earth gathers, admires and spends, inhabiting a very distant galaxy to the one being serenaded by Theresa May at the very same time in Birmingham.
Too many people in positions of power behave as though they have more in common with international elites than with the people down the road, the people they employ, the people they pass on the street. But if you believe you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere.
Cornelia Parker, a citizen of both Britain and Germany, married to a citizen of America. She's a star here, a Turner Prize nominee and one of Britain's most prominent sculptors and installation artists.
Well, these are not abstractions. This is a prison wall. This is Pentonville Prison. The builders were filling cracks in the prison wall, and I was passing it every day on the way to studio, and I thought, I really love these. They look like abstract expressionist paintings. The creativity around the country is boomed in the last 30 years because of all the influence we've had from Europe. For me, I go all over Europe sharing my work, and to America, and people from America and all over the world come here. Art Fair here is stuffed with people from Europe. You can hear it in their voices. But you know, you wonder 5 years down the line if Frieze Art Fair is going to be quite as fluid. And I think what I fear the most, since we've been in the European Union, all the best people from all over Europe have come to London. All the best chefs, best artists, you know, the best scientists.
Yeah. This is an example of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and so they've all been attracted, you know, to this place. And now, you know, we don't want a brain drain.
Because Britain is a sort of creative superpower, or a creative power, let's put it like that.
Well, it's our biggest export. It's our biggest manufacturing base is the creative industries. You know, really we should be holding on to those great creative spirits that have decided to come to Britain and contribute to our, you know, national identity. A
lot of people who voted for Brexit who live in another part of the country, don't live in London, might say what this represents has absolutely nothing to do with them.
But it does, but sadly, it's the other parts of the country have been getting the most money from Europe, you know. So Cornwall, you know, has had lots of money from Europe and they resoundingly voted Brexit. So it's really odd. Perhaps I don't add those two things together and understand that they're connected. But I think it was a protest vote, actually, against the status quo.
I've got about 700 or 800 drawings, and they're all part of what I call breaking news. They said they would allow us to win the 1966 World Cup if we stayed inside the EU.
Yeah. Performance artist Michael Landy became famous not for breaking news, but breaking things, his own things, all of them. But after a year chocker with news, there was only one truly big story: Brexit.
When Remain lost, I kind of thought, God, I must live in a bubble, and I don't really know what's going on in my own country. And I think that came as a bit of a shock, actually, thinking, and then I think it was partly all that stuff in one way or another, I've dealt with over the last maybe 25 years of my art career, in a way, Scrappy Services closing down. So all those people we scrapped all those years ago came, you know, they wanted to keep the establishment, and that's what they did. And,
did you sympathise with that?
Yeah, I do, yeah, to an extent. Yeah, to an extent, but I just think it's sent out a kind of message that, you know, like people say, oh, we're still open for business, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels we're sending out all these other signals saying, you know, outsiders stay away, you know, which I don't feel comfortable with.
So whether London can maintain its place at the epicentre of the global art world may depend on the political aftershocks of our very own British earthquake. Well, a little earlier I spoke to the actor and director Nick Moran and the author Drita Say Mitchell about whether they think Brexit will affect the arts here in the UK. And I began by asking what they made of Theresa May's comment that if you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere.
This notion that you've got a Prime Minister who says we're citizens of nowhere needs to get with a programme, she needs to get with a grassroots.
You disagreed with her on that one?
I think I do, yes. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, very clearly disagree with her. And it's those type of...
But has Brexit made that easier or more difficult?
I think it's made it easier because I actually think these are issues of diversity, of education, of funding that have been there since the beginning. However, I don't think people in the establishment were taking it seriously enough. However, what you have with Brexit is people are saying, my voice isn't being heard. I feel excluded.
Let's put that to Nick Moran. Nick, what did you think of that?
This underinformed opinion that all of the arts, the money was in the south and it was just so people in London could sit back and enjoy Picasso. It's absolute nonsense. And the way that European film funding and arts funding worked was art shouldn't be a citizen of the world. We're not some strange manila mixed up brown mess. Everybody has a cultural spike and a voice around Europe. And there was funding for people to be able to see that and experience it. All of Mike Leigh's films are funded mostly by the French. Ken Loach's films are funded through Europe.
Okay.
The way that the money moves around is going to stop, and we're going to end up with our own culture celebrating ourselves with no input from anyone else.
Funding is not everything in arts, is it? I mean, it's also about the creative spirit. Does Drita not have a point that if we focus, if we're in the moment of soul-searching about who we are on this island, this is not a bad thing. This can create a lot of great art. It could be good for creativity.
It becomes a monologue rather than a dialogue. Art is a cross-cultural merge. It's making Raspberry Ripple out of vanilla ice cream. You have to put something else in there. Otherwise, you end up with the same thing. You end up with a boring monologue. And the great thing about European funding and the way that people cross-fertilise is that it generates art. Art is generated by conflict. The conversation we're having in this studio right now is artistic because me and the studio guest don't necessarily agree.
And if you look at creative cities in history, you know, Venice in the 14th century, Rome in the 16th century, Florence, Vienna at the turn of the last century, Berlin in the 1920s, these cities were at their most creative because they embraced the outside.
And I'm saying that. I have to say, I think from the get-go, one of the things that I've always said publicly about when the referendum, when we were going into this, was I find it really backwards to think of ourselves as just European. And particularly, we're in an increasingly multicultural Britain. Why are we just branding ourselves as European? We are international, we're global, but we're also British at the same time.
Let me ask Nick one thing. Isn't the problem, Nick, that in a lot of the conversation, perhaps even this conversation, people outside the metropolitan bubble of London just feel left out of the conversation? It is meaningless to them.
You think that people in Manchester, this huge creative hive that has generated some of the most important music, some of the most vibrant recent art scene, so you think that people in Edinburgh or Glasgow, you think that they think they're outside of the bubble?
Yes.
They'll take us on.
Yes.
They'll roll their sleeves up and take us on. And so what? If we are the capital of this city, we should be heralding it. People in Paris, people outside of Paris aren't moaning about those artists in Paris. That's myopic.
But it's not about...
What you should be is feeding your energy towards the that generates the thing that we're talking about.
Nick, I think you're out of touch. And I think what you have is I do think you're out of touch. You've got a retrospective hat that you're wearing and you're looking at Britain in the past. You're looking at Britain in the 90s. We're in 2016, and what
Yeah,
lots
I'm fully
of
aware
people...
of the
What
date.
lots of... Nick,
Right,
let me finish.
let me
Nick,
stop you there, 'cause
Nick.
let me stop you there, 'cause that's a little bit patronising. Now, we are in 2016. Let's look at this. Let's go retrospective, because history is about being able to learn something and take it forward. We are at the aftermath of what was a fantastic boom in the world of art, theatre, literature, cinema, all of these cultural things. And it came in the wake of the cross-fertilisation across Europe. That's what happened
Not just
in our little
Europe.
Britannia explosion.
Not Nick,
now, that's
Nick,
yes,
not just
and,
Europe.
Okay, yeah, and America,
Nick,
and Europe,
Nick,
and
I'm black.
Africa.
Nick,
That's
I'm
the
black.
aftermath.
Nick, I'm
That's
black.
the aftermath.
Nick,
so no,
I'm black.
listen.
So
Listen,
you
listen.
keep-
No. So that's the
will speak when
physical,
you finish.
historical aftermath. And that's where we are. I'm
Not
being
just Europe,
retrospective.
Nick,
I'm
not
not looking
just
retrospective.
Europe.
And I'm not
What-
out of the loop. I'm telling you something that you haven't appreciated.
I have
That's
appreciated
what
it.
happened.
Nick, what you haven't appreciated, because you can't see me, is I'm black. So, you know, and you will say yourself
What
that one of the...
difference does that make?
Because my...
What possible difference does that
because
make?
part
What
of
a-
my
what a
cultural
incredibly
heritage...
irrelevant thing to say.
No, you keep saying it's just about Europe. Part of my cultural heritage, Nick, is from the Caribbean. And the Caribbean, as you know, and I'm sure you will agree, has had an instrumental impact on the culture of Britain.
Massive.
Brilliant
Example of how cross-cultural
so it's not just about Europe, is it?
Because we have reggae, we have those things that happened in the 60s because of the migration routes. Now that's a
Absolutely.
great example of cross-cultural colonisation. And you're
That's
saying
not
that without
European.
Europe, we won't have it. Because
That's
it
not
doesn't have to be
European. It's not European, it's international. It's not European, it's international.
But can we be
So when you
both?
put
We
the
can be
fence
open
around
to
this
Europe,
country
and we
and you
can be
say
open
that
to the
we're
rest
not
of the
part
world.
of anywhere else...
What we've done with the Brexit vote is we've not left Europe. What we've done is we've left an organisation, or, well, we'll see what happened, called the EU. That's what we've done. We've not left Europe. We're not leaving the rest of the world.
After this feast, we're going to leave it there. Nick, Drita, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
UK Independence Party has been plunged into new turmoil after one of its leadership contenders had to be rushed to hospital following a clash with a party colleague. We're joined now live from Bristol by the UKIP donor and co-founder of Leave UK, Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks, good evening and thank you for joining us. You've put out a very strong statement today for naming people. Neil Hamilton, for example, spewing his bile, you say, before anyone who knew if Stephen, the injured man MEP today, was going to be OK. He truly is a creature from the gutter who'll do anything to get his mug on the screens. You also attack Douglas Carswell as well. And, I mean, Solly, what's happened now? You're about to take your money away, aren't you?
Well, evening, John. It sounded like you were having a punch-up in the studio in the last story.
So
can you just repeat the question? I
sorry, the
struggled to hear
question
that.
is, what is happening to your party? They're tearing themselves apart, and you're doing quite a lot of the tearing.
Well, I think there's a very small minority of the party that have had a problem, and it's the Hamilton and Carswells of this world. I think the party is quite united. I think what happened in Brussels is unfortunate, but I think to go onto the airwaves and sort of make fun of Stephen when he's in a hospital bed is just pretty unacceptable.
Well, why did you say what you said about Neil Hamilton and Douglas Carswell?
Well, because I think they're utterly reprehensible people. Certainly Hamilton today, the comments on the TV were totally unacceptable. I mean, someone's just been taken to hospital, is unwell, was potentially dying, and then to go on and make fun of that person is pretty horrible.
But you're one of the absolute key funders of the party. You must be wondering whether your money's now been spent and it's time to move on. Are you thinking perhaps of stopping funding UKIP?
Well, look, I'm not at the moment. I think if you look at the Labour Party, it's got its problems as well. There's a lot of trouble. A lot of people in the Labour Party think their party have been taken over by a certain section of it. And I certainly think that what we've got to do is reclaim the kind of sensible UKIP agenda, and I think we can do great things against the Labour Party. I'm not that fussed about it, but I do think that what happened today was unfortunate. I think to be making capital out of it or making fun of someone that's ill is pretty horrible.
In your statement today, you say if Neil Hamilton and Douglas Carswell remain in the party and the NEC decide that Stephen Wolfe cannot run for leader, I'll be leaving.
I think that's pretty much it, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I do think that this, in a certain sort of way, may bring things to a head. I think that it had to happen, that things that have been said have to be said, and I think that there will be a change now.
Aaron Banks, thank you very much indeed for taking time to come and talk to us. Thank you. We'll be back tomorrow at 7.
Indeed. But for now, that's Channel 4 News. Thanks for watching. Have a good evening.
Good evening.